few weeks ago, I noticed that the mainstream news outlets were reporting a story about how the obesity is now being listed as an official risk factor for catching the virus that shall not be named due to demonetization on YouTube. It caught my eye because it's something that I have been noticing pretty much since the start of this whole fiasco. Whenever you could see news stories appearing about nurses and bus drivers who sadly passed away due to catching the virus, it was reported that these people were otherwise healthy and young, and it was a kind of way to make people feel scared, I suppose, to bring attention to the fact that anybody could die from this and it's not just a flu. And yet if you saw pictures of these people who died, they were usually a little on the heavy side, or a lot. But anyway, that's not what this video is about. This video is going to be about the response to this little tidbit of information that really should have been reported a long time ago, but anyway, it's only recently been sort of proven scientifically, so it was reported, and the response to that is that the government is now talking about, once again, putting regulations on unhealthy food. Veterans of the Poe the Person channel might remember when I made a video more than a year ago now about this exact story happening again, but this time that was under Theresa May, and the subject was about sort of a calorie cap on ready meals. We already have a sugar tax, meaning that when I go to buy a Coca-Cola, I have to pay an extra 20 pence or so because I don't like to drink Diet Cola. I like to drink the full sugar version. And that's the same regardless of whether you buy it in a supermarket or in a pub or at a restaurant. And so my point in that video, which I will sum up again, is that people should be free, in my opinion, to destroy their own bodies if they want to, or to decide for themselves what they believe is a reasonable amount of sort of anything to consume, sugar or fat, any kind of food. If somebody chooses to destroy their body in that way, or if they just make a series of poor decisions that add up to that being the consequence, that certainly is a tragedy in my opinion, but I don't think that's the government's fault, and I don't think it's their responsibility to step in and place regulations that affect everybody to protect these people from themselves. And I don't even think it's very effective. It's certainly never proven to be effective, so I'd need to be convinced about the effectiveness, but even so, it doesn't really change my opinion about the ethics of it, I think. In response to arguments like the one I just made, people often bring up tobacco as a comparison. Tobacco is a product that has been massively regulated in the UK. The packaging that it comes in, the advertising for it, which is non-existent now. And I remember all of that regulation being debated when I was sort of, I guess, younger than a teenager, but that was when they were just bringing in the rules about smoking indoors. So it's now illegal in the UK to smoke in any indoor public space, so that means pubs and restaurants, basically. And the logic behind that particular law is about second-hand smoke mainly. It's not about you hurting yourself with your smoking, but the effect that smoke that you exhale and that's just coming off of your cigarette or whatever, what is that doing to other people who might be around you? People who might be pregnant or children. It can have particular bad effects on people like that, or people with asthma. But aside from that point, I think there actually are a few other reasons why junk food is not like tobacco. And my first reason is this term junk food or unhealthy food, which is actually something that I really hate to say because I really don't know what it means. And so it's one of those terms that I think is just used as a political weapon more than as a valid concept. I remember a news story from, I think, earlier this year or maybe last year about TfL, Transport for London, having to sort of revise their artwork that they've been putting up for tourists to show them which parts of London you could go for different attractions. And some of these attractions were food, and some of those food attractions were deemed to be not healthy. And in that list of unhealthy food items that you could find in London were things like curry on Brick Lane, or strawberries and cream at Wimbledon. There really doesn't seem to be a very well-defined boundary on what we consider to be healthy or unhealthy, or junk food and sort of good food. Although there are plenty of people who will say otherwise, I'm of the opinion that all food pretty much can be consumed in moderation without doing any sort of lasting permanent damage or any damage at all, depending on, it's all just a case of dosage. Swiftly on to my second point, which is that you can enjoy food in moderation, unlike cigarettes that are, as far as I know, they are damaging, from the first one that you smoke. You're just putting more, tar into your lungs, basically. I don't know if that's a scientific way of putting it, but that's the expression anyway. There's no sort of healthy number of cigarettes that you can inhale. There's no balanced diet when it comes to smoking tobacco. And my final point about this comparison is that cigarettes contain nicotine, which is an addictive substance. It's a sort of a chemically addictive substance, meaning that it's not addictive in the same way that sugar is addictive. As far as I understand it, there's sort of two kinds of addiction. You can have a sort of chemical dependency where your body will have a physical withdrawal from whatever substance when you take yourself off it, and you will need more and more of it to satisfy that sort of craving that you get for it. Unlike sort of sugar and video games, other things that have a kind of a sort of softer addictiveness, where it's more of a kind of habit, in the sense that you get into the routine of consuming these things. They start to replace other things in your life that you might prefer to be doing or prefer to be eating. But aside from all those points about why tobacco is not like food, I actually don't know whether these reasons are the reason why I feel differently about junk food than I do about tobacco. The tobacco regulations were brought in when I was very young, before I was really thinking sort of critically about the world, about politics. I certainly had no libertarian ideas at that time, and in fact I like being able to be in a pub or a restaurant without having to taste other people's smoke. And I actually kind of like the smoking culture that has emerged because of this, where people will step out of the pub for a moment to smoke together, and on the occasions when I've, for one reason or another, had to go out with a smoker, leave the premises to smoke outside with them, I've actually really enjoyed the sort of atmosphere of talking to other smokers in this sort of little group. I find it very difficult to talk to strangers, but somehow when you're all smoking, it's much easier. So I like all of the consequences that I've personally experienced from these regulations. But I do wonder to what extent people just accept things that are in place, or the status quo of things when they are, a child, when they're growing up. That becomes sort of the normal way of things, and so it's hard to sort of convince yourself to be upset about any of these things, or any of these changes that happened before you were born that you didn't get to see. Maybe my reaction to this can just be summed up as, old thing good, new thing bad, which is just so often the that's so often the frame that people use to form their opinions without even knowing it, I think. People want to raise their children in the world that they were raised in. There's a kind of nostalgic instinct, I think, that makes people want to preserve the world that they grew up in, and sometimes that sort of emerges later in life, but for me, I guess I'm aged prematurely in that sense. And so coming back to obesity and about junk food regulations and the sugar tax, maybe these things are just abhorrent to me because they're the new version. But regardless of why I feel this way, I do, and I hope that these regulations don't pass. I mean, we've already got this stupid sugar tax, and I doubt we're going to get rid of it in the next 20 years. But in the meantime, I'm actually going to finish this video with a suggestion, which I hardly ever do, but I think I've got a good idea in this sense. I don't think I've ever talked about, in fact, legalizing drugs or legalizing cannabis on this channel before, but in this case, I think legalizing cannabis might be a step away from tyranny, in the sense that we're granting people more freedoms and not less, and it might actually help with obesity, since many people consume a lot of calories drinking recreationally, Going to the pub is a sort of a national pastime. It's how you meet the people who you like. It's much easier to meet people at the pub than it is to bring them into your own home. And so I think if we could replace, at least in part, this culture of drinking with a culture of smoking, which, because sort of coming back full circle to the tobacco thing, smoking cannabis has 0 calories. And it has its own health downsides associated with that, of course. I'm not one of those people who pretends that it's a panacea, but I think if the government is seriously going to look at suggestions of how to tackle this problem with obesity in the UK, I think weed could be a good start. It's something that I would put on the table. There are so many obese and overweight people who want to lose weight, and they don't like to be pressured into going out drinking or going out eating together, because you want to see your friends, and yet you don't want to be consuming all those calories. And so I think it would be really good to have places where you can go to smoke, to recreationally enjoy a drug like alcohol was also a drug. So that is my proposition, and let me know what you think of that, or what you think of anything I said in this video. I didn't make a video last week, although I was thinking about making it about this subject, so this is almost like a 2-parter video where I've stuck 2 weeks worth of thoughts into one thing. So I hope you've enjoyed this roller coaster of a train of thought. Thank you very much for watching, as always. I look forward to reading your comments, and I'll see you again soon, I hope.